Okay, welcome back to the second half of Grande Prairie City Council meeting for Monday, January 13th, 2020. We are here for some public hearings. We did have one scheduled delegation who I believe was not able to attend this evening and let us know in advance. So we'll move straight into 14.1, which is the public hearing for a number of bylaws. Bylaw C 108710, an amendment to the Northeast Area Structure Plan. Bylaw C 1409, the Copperwood Outline Plan. Bylaw C 1410, the Kingsgate Outline Plan, and Bylaw C 1260-112, Land Use Bylaw Amendment. I'd call this public hearing to order, and I would look to administration, Mr. Welton, for an introduction. Mr. Welton.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In essence, this is an application to amend the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan. There are some corresponding amendments that I'll go through. I think I set the record for the most motions recommended at a council meeting. We received an application to amend the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan. Kingsgate is located in the northeast corner of the city. Thank you. Kingsgate Landing is located in the northeast corner of the city. It's north of the Copperwood. Kingsgate itself is fully undeveloped at this point. Copperwood to the south is developing from the south. So it's kind of filling in. The area to the north is slated for industrial development. The area further to the east is all slated for residential development, and obviously the area to the west is the Crystal Lake Estates area, which is all fully developed. The amendment to the Northeast Area Structure Plan, which is part of the package here, essentially it is a change to the road network in essentially this one quarter section, and essentially it's for consistency with the proposed Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan. The location of the storm is the same. The multifamily is proposed to be removed, which is obviously part of the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan as well, and the school site shifts slightly to the south, and then there's a few changes to the road network on the east side of the property. I'll go to Kingsgate here. The Kingsgate Outline Plan, this kind of shows a before and after. The one on the left is in black and white is the existing outline plan. The one on the right is the proposed. The large green area in the proposed outline plan represents the existing wetland in the area. In the past, it was permissible, if I'll use the word, to actually develop these wetlands and actually kind of destroy them and build on them by providing compensation to Alberta Environment. That has become much more difficult than it used to be. In addition, the city has adopted a new stormwater master plan, which looked at the whole stormwater system in the city. It identified that the city of this size has a very large number of stormwater ponds, and recommended that we go to this kind of stormwater model, which actually uses the existing wetland, retains it, retains the function of the wetland to actually convey and store water. And so that's incorporated into this outline plan amendment, and as a result of that, obviously the more or less the entire road network and land use map is proposed to change. The new outline plan, as the old one, includes a school site. The school boards have identified a school is needed in this quarter section. And so this does retain a school site, which obviously will benefit the residents in this area and probably some of the surrounding residential neighborhoods, because the catchment area is larger than one quarter section. The proposed amendments are generally consistent with the municipal development plan, which identifies the area for residential development. The proposed plan does not exceed 25% plus 4 hectares of RS, which is also part of the municipal development plan requirement for new neighborhoods. The site does propose to eliminate 3 multifamily sites that are unserviced. Roads and lotting have been reconfigured, and no land use compatibility is being introduced. In fact, 5.1 hectares of multifamily is proposed to be eliminated. As I mentioned previously, the northeast area structure plan identifies the land uses in not only Kingsgate Landing, but Copperwood to the south. I think I will actually back up here a little bit now. No, I'll go forward. Sorry. This is the Copperwood outline plan, which is also proposed to be amended. The main changes are I'm not sure if you can see the hand here on the screen. The main changes are right at the very north end, far away from any of the area that has been developed. Essentially, it is proposing to reduce the number of road connections between Kingsgate Landing and Copperwood, because of a road change in because of a road change in Kingsgate Landing, the location of this road was changed. And then, as you can see in the green area here, this green park space was reconfigured slightly due to the road network changes. The maps here show the existing and proposed rezonings. As you can see, the existing site had three multifamily sites, 5.1 hectares. I think I mentioned the proposal is to go to just RS and RG, and then the school site would be rezoned public service. The proposed amendments were advertised in accordance with requirements of the MJ and the land use bylaw. Signs were placed on the property, and letters were sent to all the surrounding property owners in accordance with the land use bylaw. Notice was also put on the city website regarding these amendments, and no comments were received. The amendments will allow for the development of the Kingsgate Landing neighborhood in accordance with the proposed outline plan amendment. The amended OP would designate the area exclusively for low-density residential. The RS and RG districts would allow single and semi-detached dwellings, and would also allow secondary suites in accordance with the secondary suite provisions in the land use bylaw. And the school site would be zoned public service, which is the appropriate zoning for that use. I believe that the most significant issue here, or significant feature, is the preservation of the wetland in this neighborhood, which is in accordance with not only the city's new stormwater master plan policy, but really in accordance with Alberta Environment's direction as far as the preservation of wetlands in urban areas. With respect to the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan and Copperwood Outline Plan, when those were adopted, they were adopted by resolution. It's council policy through the MDP that they be converted into bylaws, and therefore that the bylaws 1409 and 1410 are the conversion of those two outline plans from resolution adopted to bylaw adopted. And so we're recommending that you make the noted 18 motions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Welton. Thanks for setting out all the work in front of us this evening. So we will continue with the public hearing after a brief opportunity for council members who may have any questions for administration at this time. We'll have an opportunity for questions for administration from council. Then we'll hear from those in support of the proposed changes. We'll have an opportunity to hear from anyone opposed to the proposed changes. And then before we close the public hearing, another opportunity for questions for administration from council. So first, Councillor Bressie, questions for administration.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. I've got a couple questions. One is just surrounding this, going from a manufactured storm pond to a wetland. Could you just walk me through? I think I understand the benefits of doing that, but I want to make sure I fully understand. Could you walk me through a little bit about why standards have changed and why the wetland's preferable?
Through the mayor, the previous stormwater model was the development of storm ponds. So throughout the city, if you look at an aerial photo of the city or maps or whatever, there are storm ponds all over the place. You know, they function to capture the amount of stormwater that would normally run off the land and then discharge it back into the environment sort of at the pre-development rate. And they're highly engineered. The new model is there's, I guess, twofold, and I mean the Scott Rosser's an engineer here, might be able to jump in like when it's his chance to be to speak on this matter. The new model does a couple things. One is it retains the stormwaters in accordance with what Alberta Environment wants to happen with these natural features that are on the landscape. So the storm pond in this particular case, or the stormwater management will be a forebay. So essentially, it's going to look like an old-fashioned storm pond. It's 2.5, 3 meters deep. It's going to be fairly linear. The function of it is to capture the stormwater that's run off the neighborhood. It kind of acts as a bit of a filter, takes out the sediment, and then cleaner water is then it basically flows out into the wetland. So the wetland will retain its natural function. So the way it's going to look is pretty much exactly the way it would look now after a big storm, where all the surface water kind of runs to this one particular area. The ground gets wet, some of it soaks into the ground, and then the rest of it kind of runs off into, back into the natural storm drainage channels. And then this, like I said, this forebay is going to collect the water and filter it. So the benefit from an environment standpoint is that it preserves the wetland and sort of the natural filtration system that existed since the last ice age is all retained and used in the neighborhood. And quite frankly, it kind of works as an amenity in the neighborhood because you have a natural area that is PUL or environmental reserve. It's public land and is actually publicly accessible. This plan proposes to put a trail along the edge of it. So it kind of creates sort of a natural amenity for people who actually live in the area to be able to actually go out and sort of enjoy some of this environment when it's dry. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other questions for administration?
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm just curious, could you tell me between the plan as it exists today and as it is proposed in the amendments, what happens to the population numbers and what happens to the percentage dedicated towards open space and public utility lots?
Through the mayor, the amount of space that would be like open space public utility lot increases by 3.45 hectares, which represents 7.6%. That represents the PUL that's on the site, the MR, and then if you are looking at the top of the table, there's a large area that's identified as less wetland, which is 9.44. That also constitutes part of the open space. So the amount of public open space will increase by 3.45 hectares. With respect to population, the population projection goes down by 347 people. That will be a combination of the fact that there's 3.5 hectares less developable land, and then the elimination of the multifamily sort of plays the other part in that, in the reduction of population. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilton. Just a quick question in regards to the reduction of the multifamily sites. Now, council made a new addition to the bylaw. When you eliminate multifamily, the developer has an opportunity to, I guess, chip in a little extra money to change that designation. Was that employed in this ASB?
Through the mayor, it hasn't yet. I mean, certainly the applicants are familiar with the council policy. I believe Mr. Rossler has kind of been involved in it on a couple of occasions previously. The reduction of multifamily, keep saying the reduction of multifamily is 5.1 hectares. Per the policy, which I believe is $5,000 per hectare, that number would be $25,500. I guess the applicants can speak to that a little bit more later. I think they kind of believe that the changes to this outline plan are so comprehensive that it's like equivalent to repeal and replace, and therefore it's possible that the policy doesn't apply. So they're aware of it. We're aware of it. I don't think a decision has been made to what extent it does or doesn't apply, or checks written. None of that has occurred yet.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Given, and thanks for that, Dan. Just a question in regards to population generation. Typically, your school sites are developed in and around population centers so that the population can be generated mostly locally. With the elimination of 343, did you say?
347. Yeah.
347, thank you. Of 347 units, are we still going to be able to achieve the population that the school will require to fill it?
Through the mayor, I guess a couple things. One is with 300, and I have not done the calculation. My expectation is based on 347 students, population of, or 347 people, population students is 20% of the total. And this would be a public K-8 school, so that probably the number of public K-8 students in this neighborhood might drop by like 70. That's just off the top. That's just off the top of my head. How do I describe this? In the past, where families had lots of kids, the catchment area for a school was obviously much smaller. If you look at the number of, people who don't have kids, people who have very small, like one child families, no child families, all of that. The catchment area for a school is actually much bigger than it used to be. And so there's no expectation that the Kingsgate landing area will be the catchment area. The catchment area for a public K-8 school is probably 4 quarter sections. So a reduction of maybe, guessing 70 students wouldn't have that much of an impact. And the school boards have a lot of leeway with respect to how big they build the schools. Public school board, for example, will build schools anywhere from like 600 to 900 students. So based on future population projections, when they're ready to build the school, they will kind of size the school based on
surrounding neighborhood.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for administration this time? Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. And one more question, Dan. I hope you can answer this. So I'm looking at map 2 on, I guess, page 70 of the council package in the Kingsgate outline plan. It shows the wetland area, and it is a pretty sizable wetland, and I'm very happy that we're looking to preserve that wetland. But there are other wetland-like areas in and around that look like they're going to be developed over, largely in the northwest and the south of the plan. Has that been taken into account, or is there going to be compensation that the developer or the city may have to give back to the province for potentially filling those little channels or ponds?
Through the mayor, yes. I believe there are a few areas, few small areas that are classified as wetlands that the developer will likely have to pay compensation to the province for.
Thank you.
Mr. Welton, I did have one question. So one of the more significant changes is the reduction of connections between the Kingsgate area and the Copperwood area. Overall, in terms of the road network, how comfortable is administration that this meets I believe the MDP intent of a modified grid network that has better connections and less areas where there's sort of one egress, one act.
Through the mayor, I think that we, to the extent that you can, given the fact that there's this large wetland that's in this neighborhood, I think we're comfortable that this represents modified grid to the extent that it's possible to do. With respect to the connections at Copperwood, the number of connections is, I think, going down from 5 to 2. Our engineering department is very comfortable with that. 2 is actually almost an unusually large number for connections between neighborhoods like this. 5 is, there's nowhere else in the city where there would have been 5. 2 is slightly unusual. 1 is actually more common. So this kind of represents, or a pretty good amount of connections. The other thing is our transportation engineering folks like to direct people onto collector roads and then onto the arterials. And a lot of these connections were intended to be local roads. So this kind of represents more their philosophy of directing people onto collectors and then onto arterials. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else in the queue for any other questions for administration. Council will have another opportunity before we close the public hearing. So I now invite anyone who is here to speak in support of the proposed changes and application. I have a feeling that may be our front row. Gentlemen, if you could, it's 2020. I'll just remind everybody of how this works, just in case you've forgotten. Please just introduce yourselves, both of you, for our recording secretary, and welcome.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Scott Rossler with Helix Engineering.
And I'm Kevin Backus with Anthem United.
Thank you for having us today. We are, again, we're representing the land developer on this file. I'll try to address all the questions that did come up and give a little bit of clarity to them as well. This amendment was initiated to kind of project feasibilities, and a lot of things have changed. This outline plan's been in existence since I think 2008, and didn't write that down, but it's been a while. The plan that did exist had the real reason for doing this is mostly to do with the wetland. The province has changed their policies and has changed their directive. It's always been their intention to maintain wetlands and things like that. So this is a bit of a good news story as far as the province of Alberta and Alberta environment and what they would like to see with natural habitat and wetlands. So we do have, we will be conserving all of the major natural wetland on the property. There are some small wetlands that we would call kind of pocket wetlands throughout the property that it's very difficult to develop around, so we've kind of maintained what we can. That'll be done through the detailed design process, and when we get to that stage, what we do is go through a wetland compensation package with Alberta Environment, and those all get dealt with. So Alberta Environment's been circulated on this file, and they do have they have knowledge of what's going on here. The wetlands that will be destroyed are of a little bit lower value, so they're not as significant as the big one that's on the east side of the property. So the reason for doing it, as far as function, and deal with Mr. Bressy's comments, there is wetlands can act as storm storage facilities and whatnot from an engineering perspective. So there are opportunities there for us to basically utilize what's there today to still accommodate and function in a manner that is consistent with kind of best management practices for stormwater management. The cost of doing that is the land. So obviously there's a significant amount of land that gets eaten up by the fact that we're using this wetland, and our storage volumes are the same, but we use a lot larger land and a lot lower fluctuation in water levels. So that's essentially how that works. We tried to take as much advantage of the natural features and whatnot on the property as we could. So we've got a lot of amenity lots. There's lots along the back of the wetland. There's on the west side of the property, and I might get, if we could get administration, can you stick the land use plan up maybe on the screen? On the west side of the property, there is a green space that would have existed in the old plan as well, but we've tried to take advantage of that and provide better connections between the neighborhoods to the west, so being Lakeland, and to the south being Copperwood. We've provided linkages to both the Copperwood Park system and then what will be the constructed school at some stage within the Kingsgate development. So the big green block obviously is the school. It hasn't moved much in location. It is a little bit better shape now, so the school board, as a general rule, likes to see rectangular shaped parcels. So we've kept that. We have connected, there's a proposed trail system along the 88th Street, which is on the whole west side of the property, that connects 132nd Ave to the school system, to Copperwood, to Lakeland as well. So that is in accordance with what the school boards have requested. We did ask them again, because it's been over 10 years since this was adopted, if they needed a school site here. They overwhelmingly said yes. So that's where most of the MR is allocated, is through that. The rest of the MR is adjacent to that natural wetland. So difficult to see on this plan because there's a lot of green, but the perimeter around the wetland is a municipal reserve as well, and the last reserve is the connection to the Copperwood area on the south there. So a couple more things through the servicing. So as you're all aware, we do design reports for these projects as they proceed through outline plans. So not many issues with the water connections. Everything will connect through Copperwood and connect into Lakeland, so it'll increase the reliability of Aquaterra's network with a bunch of looping that'll occur. Transportation, from that perspective, it's basically the same. There's still two collectors, a collector east-west and a collector north-south. The orientation of it's changed somewhat, but we did take out those connections to the Copperwood development, which in all essence, they're all local connections, so they would carry less than 3,000 vehicles per day on them, which is a fairly low volume. So we'd funnel everything to the collectors and then out to the arterials, which is adjacent arterials are 132nd Avenue and 116th Avenue to the south through Copperwood. So the storm sewer system that we are utilizing, so you can see that little blue patch there on the south side of the wetland, that acts as a forebay. So essentially that'll provide a little bit of cleaning of the water, a little sediment reduction, things like that. And then to the east, there'll be a control feature that will make sure that the wetland's not impacted negatively in any way. So we'll have utility lots, which each will have trail systems connected to them. So you can see those little, I think they're blue on the map, connections to the wetland that will allow the neighborhood to get to that location. So be somewhat similar to what's around Crystal Lake, I think, essentially. It's a little bit less prominent wetland. It's less of a lake, more of a wetland, which I don't know if that makes any sense. And then the other thing that is occurring with the design reports is we're bringing a sanitary sewer up to service this. So to service this development, we are bringing sanitary from the south side of Copperwood. So it's over a kilometer from here to bring the sanitary sewer up, which is a bit of an endeavor, but Aquaterra has been working with us on that. So we will bring sanitary from essentially 116th Avenue east and then north up to the southeast corner of this development. And that's a 450, so an 18-inch diameter sanitary line that will service this development, and it'll be extended through the development all the way up to 132nd Avenue. And that line will also service, there's 3 industrial quarters to the north of this that most of you are probably familiar with. So that is the sanitary servicing for those 3 quarters. So those will all be accommodated in capacity, size, grade, as far as Aquaterra is concerned, to service the 3 industrial quarters. So you're in the range of 400 acres of land up there. So we are, just to discuss or to touch briefly on the zoning, there is some zoning changes. It does result overall in a reduction in population, which means it's going to result in a reduction in traffic. It's going to reduce number of trips generated in and out of this development will be a little bit lower than what they were before, in the 15% range. The RM sites that are being removed, there was a significantly larger amount than the 5% that was required. This is one of the developments in the city that had probably quite a bit more multifamily than what was required under the MDP. So that's being taken out, and with the new revision into the RS and allowable RS zoning, we've added as much of that in as possible. I still think we're well underneath the maximum. So that doesn't necessarily mean a different house style. It just means that the lots will be, the minimum lot size is 36 feet instead of 40. So we don't generally see much difference in housing style and type and whatnot with that. It just provides a little bit more of an affordable lot to the home purchaser. So we are, the road right-of-ways within the development will be all to the new minimum standards. So these will be 10.5 meter wide carriageways for all the locals, which is significantly wider than what you would see in the adjacent, like Lakeland, first phases in Copperwood, things like that. So where the roads are about 5 feet narrower than what they would be here. we are hoping to get to phase 1 construction this year, hence the push. So we really do appreciate administration's. We've had, this is probably one of the quicker outline plans we've done in our tenure. So it's gone very, very well. We've had a lot of support from administration. We really appreciate that. And with the Copperwood amendments, most of the Copperwood and Northeast Area Structure Plan amendments are all in support of this plan, essentially. So aside from a few minor amendments to design reports, everything that you've seen today is probably adequate. We don't see any negative yield or servicing impacts coming as far as the planning in those two documents. So we didn't get any opposition during the circulation process, so I don't know if we have any concerns. I don't know if Mr. Backus has anything he wants to add.
I think you've covered most everything. Yeah, just excited to get this project going this year. Growing up in this area in the Peace River community, is kind of fun to come back and work on a project here.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Any questions for the delegation, council? A few. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in and responding to our questions and for your presentation. I know this development is important. It's important to Grande Prairie too, which is, I have a question in regards to the wetlands and the setbacks that you have set in there. I can see it on here. I'm trying to do my math based off of the scale, but what is this? What is the setback from the, I guess, the residential lot backyards that would back onto the wetland?
So it does vary fairly significantly. Obviously, the wetland has it kind of decides for itself where it's going to go. But the back of the lots is a fairly straight line. So as a general rule, I would say our wetland setback, our average wetland setback from the edge of the wetland to the back of the lots is in the range of between 15 and 18 meters. So some of that's zoned as or is going to be designated as environmental reserve. Some will be designated as municipal reserve. The municipal reserve portion will have a trail in it, whatnot. The environmental reserve portion will be kept natural. So we always run into this with wetlands, and that the farmers tend to farm pretty close to the wetland boundaries, but not always right to them or whatnot. So anything that is natural today will likely be left that way, and anything that isn't, with the municipal reserve, we're able to plant trees and put in benches and trails and things like that, and dress it up a little bit. So.
Well, that's really good. I like that you said that it goes everywhere. Now, farmers, like they'll build up to a wetland if they can. Sometimes residential owners, as seen over in the Crystal Lake area, they didn't have those same kind of restrictions. And so how do you propose, is it just planting trees and creating that buffer to ensure that a new homeowner won't build or won't plant a lawn all the way up to the wetland and then start fertilizing it and then thereby contaminating the wetlands? How do you propose to safeguard from that happening again?
So as a general rule, this is pretty standard within the city. Anytime we do develop up against a natural boundary like that, whether it's a neighborhood park or a wetland or some type of natural feature, typically there's a fence required. So most cases it's a chain link fence. Where it gets built on the back property lines. I have seen wood as well, but for the most part it's a chain link fence. We put in gates in the back of them so that they still have access to that, but that provides the boundary, and those are constructed as part of the development agreement when they proceed, and within private property, so they're not city-owned, maintained type of thing. But that's a normal occurrence. So.
Beautiful, thanks.
Councillor Bressy.
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. Thanks for coming in and explaining some details to us. I appreciate that. Just honestly, I'm still on the fence with this, and I just want to share a concern I've got. Just hear what your response to it would be, and that is, I absolutely love a lot of what's going on in this plan. I absolutely love keeping that wetland. I really like what's going on with infrastructure in this, in terms of having a few less connections. I think it could be a really good thing in terms of servicing that section further to the north. I like that. I think my concern is, and what I suspect we're going to hear some concerns expressed about, is the small lot residential that's put in here. And it's my view is that small lot residential, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think you can create a very good neighborhood even with 4 feet less per lot, but it can also exacerbate problems if it's not well done and if it's not well designed, in terms of if you're going to have issues in a neighborhood with parking and snow removal and all of that. If you make a small lot, those are going to get exacerbated if they're going to exist anyway. So just want to share with you a concern that I've got about how do I know that's going to be well done? How do I know it's going to look good at the end? And just help me alleviate that concern I've got seeing all that small lot put all. My big concern is that it's in a lot of communities, they'll spread it out a little bit so you can make use of side yards, so you can make use of linear parks to alleviate some of those parking issues. And I've got kind of a concern with it all being together and all being away from those MR and those natural areas. So I just want to share my concern to see if you guys have any thoughts about that.
Good.
Yeah. So through your mayor, we obviously talk about this with administration a lot through the process as well, through kind of identifying the different zones and the different areas, and how it's going to work out. And definitely our intent is to not create any long-term headaches for any resident or administration or the city of Grande Prairie with the zoning. Our intent is more sort of provide, different product types that are affordable and can serve a wide variety of the population. So definitely this snow removal will be taken into consideration as we kind of do our detail allotting, I'll call it, for each different stage we bring on. And the size of lots, I know RS 36 feet is the minimum. Yeah, it's kind of, hopefully I've answered your question. Maybe not the best, but
no, it's all good. We so we get that question quite often. Is how do we know that the decrease in lot size isn't going to create something that's undesirable? So we actually worked with administration a little while back through UDI and whatnot, and showed some plans, and we actually took a lot of plans from across the city. From the builders that are here. And I mean, obviously, as things change, they're going to come up with new plans and whatnot. But on a 36-foot lot, even with 5-foot side yards, you still have a 26-foot building pocket. So very easily, you're still putting a 12 to 1,400 square foot house on an RS size lot. So it is the minimum lot size, but it's not the house size and proportion in relation to the lot size are kind of unrelated. So if someone wants to come in and build a 1,000 square foot house on a 40-foot lot, they're entitled to do that. Then no one can stop them from doing that. So what we do is we utilize the RS, and in this case, that collector road that runs through the neighborhood, for example, all that's RS, but the reason, or one of the biggest reasons for that, is we've taken all the driveways off those collectors, because that's a concern that the city has, and that we don't want people backing out onto major collector roadways with out of their neighborhoods in rush hour or whatnot. So the driveways have all come off that. They go into the lanes in the backyards, which means the garage goes into the backyards, which means now that entire 26 feet is utilized for a building pocket. So you don't lose and any space to the garage. It becomes a house. I mean, we've talked, extensively about the potential to decrease front yard setbacks, things like that. So, and that's a possibility in RS. I've never been that concerned. There are problem neighborhoods out there, absolutely. But as the economy changes and as the industry changes, there's definitely a tendency to work towards constructing higher value homes and higher quality homes on smaller parcels, and you see that in every major center in Alberta right now. It's the way things go. I mean, land is the cost of land in a development like this is significant. So, hence, a good example of that is 10 years ago you saw pretty much primarily bi-levels in Grande Prairie. Now you see primarily 2 stories. So, and that's just a product of people building on smaller pockets. So it doesn't make the house worth less. It's just a different style of housing. So.
Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I just got you mentioned the wastewater line going up from 116th to 132nd. Was there any other lines, freshwater, power, or anything like that? Is that going to be like a utility corridor at that point in time?
Yeah, so through the development, we'll be extending sanitary sewer from the southeast corner of Kingsgate all the way north, and it ends up in the northeast corner. It kind of goes around the wetland right now, and that's all gets worked out with Aquaterra. But so sanitary gets extended there. Water is also extended to those industrial areas. Stormwater, they will take care of their own. So they'll either construct a pond or deal with on-site storage or underground storage or something along those lines. But for all intensive purposes, those 3 industrial quarters to the north, the biggest hurdle for them from a servicing perspective currently and for the last 15 years is 100% to do with sanitary sewer. So they're a long ways away from any sanitary. So this does assist that. It's definitely a benefit to those neighborhoods.
Power is not going to go in that area either.
Power would be extended through our development. So power required to service residential. I don't have the details on Echo Electric and whether they where they're at. There's overhead power lines on 88th Street, so I suspect that if the industrial quarters wanted to proceed, that there wouldn't be an issue.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I don't see any other council members with any other questions. And so that being the case, gentlemen, thanks very much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll ask if there's anyone else here to speak in support of the proposed changes. Is there anyone else here to speak in support of the proposed changes? Okay, seeing nobody coming forward, then I'll call for anybody who wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed changes. Is there anyone who came here this evening who wished to raise or address any concerns related to the proposed changes? Now would be your time to do it. Welcome. So, gentlemen, welcome. Have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. If I'll just ask if each of you could introduce yourself for council, so we know who we're talking to, and for our recording secretary, so we can make sure that we get your names right for the minutes. Welcome.
My name is Stephen Youngs.
I'm Ken Dolsky.
Welcome.
Thank you. Actually, the both of us do live over in Crystal Lake area, Lakeland Drive area. Right, actually, my house is backing on where you guys wanted to develop, and both of our concerns are the traffic is ridiculous as it is, never mind having a development there. Like, there's only one entrance, as you guys know on the map, and 88th Street. And we are both concerned, like, I live right in that back road, and we call it the Indy 500 or the quarter mile, right? And there's one entrance. You guys are going to have all the residential people coming out of there, never mind all Lakeland and Crystal Lake, plus everybody else who uses that route to go to work. That's a major concern. I just don't agree with that unless you guys are going to add another road somewhere else to take that load off, because we need something as we speak. Having the smaller houses, again, to me, I don't agree with that, because that just means more traffic, more hassle. The roads are skinnier. Obviously, you're talking about snow removal being an issue, more people parking, rental properties. It's just going to lower our houses as it is, I think. And I was concerned too, is like, if you're going to build a house, are you guys going to have, what kind of fencing? Are you guys going to, like, make it look like the rest of Crystal Lake, or is this going to be a chain link area? Which that's kind of a concern. But our main concern of mine is it definitely is the traffic flow in and out of there.
When is 84th Street going to be developed along 116th Avenue? That will alleviate some of the traffic from other areas through our area. So if you're going to do anything, that should be the first things done. Not wait till it's a crisis, which it is now.
It is, yeah. Now, like, you come there at 8 o'clock, you have your guys sit there, it backs up all the way down to the road, all the way to the T intersection. Like, the traffic is ridiculous. Everyone trying to get to work.
You can't put your kids outside at 8 a.m. or before 6 because the traffic is horrible.
Yeah. It is true. You guys have sat there ticketing people. I mean, you used to have a stop sign there, which we won't talk about that. And then you took it away, which is great, because I got dinged on that twice. But that's besides the point. A little show, by the way. If you want to redeem me $700, I would love you guys for that. But anyways, that traffic flow, say, going out is amazing, because everyone is using that road to go to work. And, in Lakeland, from our area to Maud Clifford, both those intersections are ridiculous, trying to get out of there. And I know you guys have people there doing your job, trying to see if you might need lights or something, but that probably won't happen for a long time. But again, having a whole new subdivision is just crazy.
Yeah, I'm really surprised no one's been hurt at Maud Clifford. There's so much traffic along there too.
Yeah.
Shortcutting out of the city. We do need a north-south collector road on 84th, and we need 116 done. That will help considerably, I feel, but you have to look at that pretty quick.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Was there anything else that you wish to share with council? You've raised some issues that council may choose to ask administration some questions about before we get on to voting. So I don't know if council members had any questions for the delegation, but we've heard your concerns around traffic on Lakeland Drive and desires to see 116th and 84th constructed sooner rather than later to try to alleviate that traffic. Is that a fair observation? Yeah. I don't see anybody ringing in with any questions. Thanks very much for being here this evening, gentlemen. Was there anybody else who wished to come forward to speak? We'll make sure everybody gets a turn. No worries. So you've seen it a couple of times. We'll just ask you to introduce yourself so we can make sure that we get your name right for the minutes. And welcome.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Dixon. I currently live in Copperwood, actually, right now. And my biggest issue with this is you're going to, like, I've looked at the phases where you do 1, 2, 3, 4. You've gotten rid of all the smaller green areas and went with a school and a wetland. So if it's like Copperwood, where it's taken 12 years to develop and we're still on phase 2, you have no parks for the kids to play with. And I don't know when your school is going to be developed and the wetlands, but there's going to be one park for that whole area. And right now, I enjoy our walk because you pass about 8 parks between Copperwood, Crystal Heights, Crystal Lake. And so you have beautiful park system, and then you're going down to no parks in a whole section. You're putting families in there, you're going to want them, you're going to have issues. I also see, like with the residential small lots, that normally in your other subdivisions, they park in the back alley, which in the winter does not exist, and now they're parking on the street, which now that's surrounded by a school. Well, you're just asking for a kid to get hit when you have vehicles parked all over. Derek Taylor is a huge example of how many vehicles are parked on the street and how dangerous it is getting in and out of that parking lot at school hours. And then the traffic. I live in Copperwood. I used to work out in Claremont, so you take the road that goes behind Crystal Lake. Oh my gosh, you close your eyes, pin it, and hope to heck you don't get hit. The traffic coming in from Byzantin is bumper to bumper. The traffic leaving those subdivisions is bumper to bumper. It is a disaster. I've sat on mat leave and watched, and I'm surprised there hasn't been a death at that intersection. So I thought I'd go up and try the one by Maud Clifford. Well, that one's worse. Coming from the industrial area at 5 o'clock, it has taken me an hour and 22 minutes to get 7 kilometers from work because of that intersection. It is a huge safety concern. Same thing, like you connect the traffic. I now go off 122nd onto Crystal Lake Drive. Same thing, like the traffic funnels right from Countryside South through, like that road should never have been connected from one end of the city to the other, for one. So now it is. It's a huge traffic concern, and adding more to that is a disaster.
Okay. Any questions for the delegation? I don't see anybody ring in. Thanks very much for being here this evening. Sir? Okay, you've seen the routine a few times.
Yeah.
Be sure to introduce yourself. Welcome. Welcome.
So, just to kind of speak to what everyone else has said.
Make sure to introduce yourself.
Sorry.
That's the first part.
Jason Gordon. My wife and I are here with our 4 kids. They're outside trying to be quiet. And so, of course, right away, those are our primary concerns with safety and traffic and such. We appealed to the city this year to get a crosswalk. So we back on the double cul-de-sac that would back right onto the second RS if you're going north to south. And there's a public bus stop. There's a school bus stop. There's actually 2 of them within 100 yards of one another. There's a paved path into Pat Gorman Park, and we can't get a crosswalk. The nearest crosswalk is actually down quite a ways south at the next largest park. I can't think of the name of the park. So the concern there is being told there's not enough traffic to justify having a bus stop, and I've witnessed vehicles come around that blind corner of Crystal Lake Drive just before the yield at Lakeland. One vehicle's slowing, another's not paying attention. They're doing 60 or 70 kilometers, and they just about took out our neighbor and their 3 kids walking in the dark. Obviously, it's still dark at that time, this time of year. Roads are icy, and there's no control in that area. There isn't a warning that there's any kind of a bus stop, public or otherwise. And there's, whether it be crosswalk signs or lights, there's just nothing there. So we don't let the kids walk to the bus stop themselves. We accompany them, or depending on the weather, like the past few days, we've just taken them to school ourselves. The other concern that I have, and just maybe more for clarification with the small lot, does that translate to low income? And are we looking at a community change where crime increases? We already see that issue in the city. Is it going to reflect with this new development and building and such? And then what does that mean for the homeowners that purposely bought in that area for safety? We chose a cul-de-sac for our kids, build a small community there, and now we're losing property value with the development of something along these lines. And that's partly a comment, partly a clarification question. Is it low income that's going in there that will have a depreciation effect on existing property owners?
I think just because that's a very specific question, I think based on the first presentation, the size of the lot or the zoning doesn't really directly impact the size of the house that gets placed on there. So there are many places in the city where you'll see $400,000 plus homes on quote unquote small lots. So the zoning doesn't necessarily speak to the income of the people that would be there. Not to say that there wouldn't be somebody that would be on a modest income or low income, but that could be somebody in any neighborhood in the city. The zoning doesn't necessarily direct who's going to live in that type of property.
I think I'm thinking more towards the type of development. So whether they're duplexes, condominiums, multiplex, 4-story walk-ups, so on and so forth, is this kind of, and it's more of a question for clarification for me as to what's going in there. So
I guess one observation I'd make is that, as administration noted, this actually has removed multifamily from the plan. So the plan actually previously had a larger area of multifamily.
Sure.
Many of the changes that are being proposed here, you might have heard some of the questions about the total population. The total population that would be in the area goes down by about 300 and some people. So there'll actually be less people there and less multifamily dwellings. The width of lots is allowed to be somewhat smaller, from 40 to 36 feet. So that's the change that RS proposes. Let's go to that 36-foot minimum lot size.
Okay. Is the plan to keep 88 decommissioned, 88th Street decommissioned north to south where it currently is? I think it's decommissioned at Lakeland Drive and then south to 121 or 122nd. Is that still the plan, to leave that and make that into walking trail, or is that going to open up as another means of access to new community?
I think I know the answer, and we don't have transportation engineering, and so I'm going to throw it over to the Director of Infrastructure and Economic Development, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor Given. There's no current plan to reopen that road.
That's it.
That's kind of got it. Okay. Any questions for the delegation? I don't see anybody else ringing in. Thanks very much for being here this evening. If your kids are doing a fantastic job of being quiet out in the hallway, my kids are in the back and they're the noisy ones. So I send somebody to go threaten them. Yeah. Okay. Was there anybody else that wished to speak to this matter? Yes, sir. Good evening. Okay, so you've seen it a couple times. Make sure you introduce yourself. And welcome.
I live in Crystal Lake.
Welcome.
I also back off of the same cul-de-sac as the last gentleman. I've heard a lot of the concerns from a lot of the people. I'd just like to concur that by adding, even though you're saying you're adding less, you're still adding to the neighborhood. So you're adding more. More houses, more people, more vehicles, more traffic. There's no thought process that I can see put in from the city on the way they build their roads and have their access to these neighborhoods. They allow the feeding of the traffic to flow right through main residential areas with roads that are designed with blind curves, making it hard for drivers to see. We're going to add to that. I've also witnessed many near misses on those streets with high-speed traffic flow. You had a stop sign, and for the life of me, you generated bunch of revenue off of it with tickets for stoplight camera, pulled the stop sign, put in a yield sign. Now, if the corner warranted a stop sign, I don't understand how it doesn't warrant one now to keep traffic slow, especially in the winter. We have a concern with the amount of, or the way we followed the plan from day one. Probably one of the last people that originally built in that area, in that cul-de-sac. I don't think there's maybe one more family in there besides myself and my wife. The way the city plans things, we were quite happy having the school, which would be a quieting area, extending behind there, and then the way the houses were built and moving away and designed in such a way to match up with the neighborhood that they're coming off of. This seems to have changed. There's a lot of talk about the green space. It feels to me that that's being used to mask the idea that you've moved a bunch of stuff around, because there's not a lot of talk about why the school's been moved. And I also read, and I don't see it in this paper, but I did read that they're going to add more housing in a smaller space. And I'm concerned that we're allowing developers to push the city in a direction of revenue for themselves and possibly the city by adding this type of development and designing it that way. So basically my concerns.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. Thanks very much for being here this evening. Was there anybody else that wished to speak on this matter? Come on down. Welcome. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Prairie. I work within the city and volunteer quite a bit with lots of organizations to get people outside. So my big concern is actually fluidity of walking paths and getting families outdoors and active in a safe manner. I try to promote as much outdoor activity to families as possible, but it's quite difficult with some of our communities around town. It's quite unsafe to actually get across the roads and all that kind of fun stuff, whether it be traffic, whether it be lack of sidewalks or walking paths. So I'm just wondering if there's any way for us to look at creating safer avenues for foot traffic or bicycle or scooter, or I don't care how you get out there, but something to actually get families outdoors and enjoying our city.
Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm just wondering, could you just be a little bit more specific about what you think in this area in your neighborhood that means?
Sure. So if you look down at Mission, there's a lot of interconnecting pathways there. You can really hop onto the pathways and not necessarily connect to the rest of the city. You can in Mission, which is wonderful because Bear Creek is there. But just having that avenue for all families to be able to connect on in a safe manner. So whether that's a main artery and then having pathways to go through that way. But when I look at the new map, it's very blockish, right, to get over to the wetlands, which I absolutely adore. There's wetlands there, but just making sure that we can actually utilize that appropriately. So I'm not sure if we can put in some more walkways in between those lower income housings or something, so that 88th Street, way back onto that it is utilized as a dog park mostly now. A lot of outdoor activities go on back there, which is wonderful. So just looking at, is there potential for more walkways through there? Safe ways for kids to get to school instead of scooting through the neighbor's backyard and that kind of stuff, right? So fluidity of footpath, I think, is probably a good term.
Pedestrian connections?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation?
Maybe a bike park? Yeah, I volunteer with the Wapiti Nordic, and then I also volunteer with Bear Creek bike parks and all that fun stuff. So yeah, I don't know if you've been down, but if you want to go down, let me know. We'll take you.
Thanks very much for being here this evening. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? I think we managed to go through everybody that was here, and everybody had an opportunity. Opportunity now for questions from council before we close the public hearing. Questions from council for administration. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Just a question for administration just on the connectivity. I'm just wondering, looking at the existing changes and looking at the original, there was never connectivity onto 132nd Ave out of this corridor. So I'm just wondering if there was proposed alignments on the corridor to the east, or why there was never any consideration for connectivity onto 132nd Ave out of this corridor.
Mr. Well.
Through the mayor, I'm going to ask IT to call up my map here again. If you look at the color map here on the right, the areas that are identified in blue, I wonder if I can actually change chance. I can make this a little bigger. There we go. The areas that are identified in blue are public utility lots. They will also be areas where people can walk between blocks. For example, between what I'm going to call 131st Avenue, those two east-west large streets this way. There is the opportunity for pedestrians to walk up into 132nd. 132nd will be a future 4-lane divided arterial, so there's going to be sidewalks and trails on both sides of that. Same with 84th Street on the east side of this plan area. I noticed a couple of the people who live in Crystal Lake have identified that they live in what I believe is this double cul-de-sac here. On the very south end of that cul-de-sac, it's not colored, but there's actually some green space along there. And what we did was, and that's kind of where the hand is on the thing, what we did was we ensured that there's walkways between that existing green space through this north-south dog park or whatever it is, and then being able to have a couple of entrances here so people can walk from Crystal Lake onto the school site. This is going to be urban standard roads, so the sidewalks, certainly the collectors are going to have sidewalks on both sides. Many of the other streets, I'm not sure if the city standard is sidewalks on both sides now, but there's going to be lots of sidewalks in the neighborhood, and then therefore short connections between most of the area, I guess, and this wetland area. There will be a trail around the edge of the wetland, and then all these little blue connections are opportunities for residents to actually get from Kingsgate and the surrounding neighborhoods out towards that wetland. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So just to clarify, I appreciate the connectivity on the trail system, which I'm not as concerned about. I guess my question was more about road connectivity of out to the north onto 132nd Ave in the old outline plan and the new one. There was never access onto 132nd. So to the comments made by pretty much every person was here today, just concerned about all the traffic going to push down on this 88th Street to get out on 132nd Ave. Just wondering where the next access or how the city was hoping to alleviate some of that pressure off of 88th Street, I guess.
Sorry for not answering the question.
It's okay. That was good.
For answering a different question.
The trail. We're going to come up to.
The applicants may be able to provide a little bit more input on this because they're obviously working directly with our development engineering folks with respect to the transportation design reports and that sort of thing. Certainly the element, if there's a concern about traffic connectivity, it's more about timing than I think sort of the number of roads. Obviously, there's two future connections to Copperwood to the south. There's one that goes west towards Crystal Lake. There's one that goes east into the adjacent area in the Northwest Area Structure Plan. That adjacent quarter section to the east is the quarter section that will have road connection up onto 132nd Avenue. And the other element is that, there are the east side of this quarter section will be the future 84th, which will be at some stage a 4-lane divided arterial road. And so there will be an opportunity for people to drive east onto that road and then go north to 132nd Avenue or south down to 116th. Many of these roads are obviously not built at the moment. I don't know what conversation that the applicant had with our transportation engineering department as far as revising the design report for transportation. So that might be a question to direct to Mr. Roster. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much. I've got a couple of others in the queue. We'll come back around if you have more, Councillor Platt. Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. And thanks, Dan, for all of your answers so far. I just have a question. There was lots of concerns, and Councillor Platt intimated a bit to it about traffic, and especially along the 132nd Avenue corridor. At what point would this development trigger perhaps our engineering department to look into maybe some traffic calming things? Like we've heard there's a stop sign, now yield sign, but even traffic circles or even a road light. I've come in on 132nd lots and caught myself going at 90 when I should have been going 60, but you're just coming off the highway, you know, and you got lead foot. And it happens to a lot of people. They don't mean to do it. They're just used to traveling fast off the highway. But has there been any thoughts in the planning and engineering department as to how we can calm traffic in along 132nd by the residential area?
Through the mayor, certainly I'm not familiar with anything related to that. Having working in the planning department, our engineering folks might be able to provide more information than that. I'm not aware of it. Unfortunately, when the engineering department asked me if somebody should be here tonight, I said I didn't think it was necessary. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you,
Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. Just a question for administration in terms of process and the right of developers. There's concerns about just development here happening at all. And so there's already an existing outline plan as of 2008. And my understanding is the developer has the right, no matter what this council wants, to move forward with the outline plan that exists. Is my understanding of just the process correct?
Through the mayor, it's not the outline plan. It's the fact that the area is actually zoned for residential development. That is what gives the landowner, fairly substantial rights with respect to developing in accordance with the zoning. So when the outline plan was adopted in 2008, the area was given certain zoning, and so certainly the developer has a large amount of right to actually develop in accordance with that existing zoning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And that's right under provincial law, not city policies, correct?
It'd be a combination of provincial law and just the common law, essentially. It's because the land is zoned, they would have the right to subdivide, which basically then gives them the right to develop. So.
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm just wondering, there was a little bit of talk about the old road that was there that existed at 88th Street at one point. I'm just wondering, does the city have any plans on what they're going to do from, I guess, 116th Street to that 116th Ave to 131st Ave or whatever? What's going to happen with that swath of land in between there at some point?
Through the mayor, my understanding is that is just open space with a trail through it, and and as Mr. Glavin mentioned earlier, that the city at this point doesn't have any intention to reopening a road there. It has been identified as green space in I believe a couple of plans, and I don't believe there's any plans to convert it away from green space with trail.
So is the current trail, I apologize, I haven't walked, but is the current trail just a man-made trail that just kind of is a goat trail, or is it actually a paved trail?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it's an informal trail at this stage, just existing of the formerly closed road right of way. Okay, so sorry, I appreciate that everybody wants to be able to share. Unfortunately, that's not the way that this forum's set up. We do try to make sure that there's an opportunity for council members to ask questions of administration, and we have to kind of go by the answers that they give us. Councillor Platt, anything further?
That was great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just a quick question, Dan. So this isn't the first time that we've had a developer come in and request the use of wetland space as green space. Now, I heard the other lady's comment that I'm looking right at the northwest corner of the property, and I think anyone who lives in that area would have to walk a considerable distance just to get to any green space, let alone the school space. And I think she made a fairly valid point. It seems pretty barren there. That's also the same area of land that I was concerned with that channel, whether it's wet or dry or how deep it is, that was going through, that'll have to get filled at some point. Perhaps it's a fen. That means a dry wetland. But eventually that could fill up. Is this becoming, are we going to compromise in the future for wetlands? Like the province has said pretty much that you can't take out wetlands unless you want to pay us a lot of money, and they're enforcing that. But are we compromising our own city standards for the creation of park space by utilizing wetlands in provincial policy?
Mr. Walton?
Through the mayor, I don't believe so. I mean, this area, this big green space here with Storm Pond for the storm I guess I'll call it a storm pond, is going to be a combination of environmental reserve and municipal reserve. Like the ER is for the environment area, and then the MR is essentially for area that's kind of the buffer between the area that needs to be protected and the houses. And in this particular case, the MR allows us to put in like asphalt trails and some amenities like benches and garbage cans and that sort of thing. Yeah. So it certainly doesn't represent, in my opinion, doesn't represent a compromise of the city standards. You know, with respect to, green space, I am a very strong advocate for linear green spaces. And to the extent that new neighborhoods are, to the extent that when new neighborhoods are planned, when there's opportunities to provide a linear green space, I personally believe that's sort of preferable to little pocket parks all over the place. One of the challenges in this particular quarter section, because this large wetland is being retained, it reduces the amount of MR that the city can require the developer to provide. It's typically, the developer is required to provide 10% of the developable area of the land as municipal reserve. In a quarter section with no environmental reserve at all, a quarter section is about 64 hectares, therefore 6.4 hectares of MR would be owing to the city. In this particular case, this ER is approximately 10 hectares, and so that reduces the amount of MR space that the city can require the developer to provide. And it just so happens that this particular neighborhood needs a school site, which takes up most of what is left for environment or for MR, and therefore there's essentially, aside from the MR around the wetland, there's essentially no MR owing that the city can actually use for any form of cross quarter section green connectivity. So it's unfortunately that a number of things have sort of occur on this property that make it impossible to create these linear green space connections. But the good news is that that there will be green space. This large MR-ER combination will provide what I think is going to be a fantastic amenity that people will have access to, being able to walk around on these trails. And then 84th Street, when it's done, will have sidewalks and trails as well. So this entire wetland area will be accessible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dan.
Councillor Clayton.
Back to Mr. Welton on the same sort of topic in regards to walking connector paths. On page 30 of our document, it shows the specific walking connecting trails, trail network. But just so I'm sure that I'm understanding, on the collector roads where there's a trail network, in addition to that, there's sidewalks on the arterials that aren't completely indicated. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes. The city's current standard for arterial roads is that one side of an arterial road will have, I believe it's a 2.5 meter asphalt trail, and the other side will have a concrete sidewalk.
In addition to what you've indicated here as trail network, there are on the arterial roads a minimum of a sidewalk on one side.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Sidewalks and trails on arterials, and then on all the local roads and collector roads. On collector roads, sidewalks on both sides, and then on local roads, sidewalks on at least one side and maybe two. Right. I don't recall the current city standard on that. So.
If I can have a follow-up. Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Can you tell me how this network system, which in my opinion is unfortunately not completely shown the intensity of it on page 30 here, but how it would compare to the development section to the west? Is it similar in comparison to connector trails, arterial sidewalks, local road sidewalks, etc.? Would it be comparable?
Through the mayor, I think it's broadly comparable. I mean, one of the principles or one of the reasons why the municipal development plan has identified future neighborhoods to use a modified grid, which is what this kind of looks like versus the the cul-de-sacs that exist in Crystal Lake is that modified grids are considered much more walkable. And so notwithstanding sort of what the specific sidewalks and trails look like, the modified grid and grid type neighborhoods are when people are walking in them, they find them much more walkable because they can walk longer distance instead of down the sidewalk, up a sidewalk, every cul-de-sac all the way along. So they're considered more walkable in general than a cul-de-sac neighborhood.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Any other questions for administration? I had one question. I guess this is probably for the director with respect to 84th, the future 84th Street. How much of that street's construction is at the control of the developer or developers in this area, and how much of it is at the control of council through council budget? Like, is the developer expected to construct that street, 84th, the future 84th Street?
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'd have to confirm, but I don't believe that the developer in this case would be required to pay that, although we would collect offsite levies for the future construction of a road, not necessarily this one, but it would likely come from our offsite levy fund.
So if council chose, that would be something council would be in charge, would have control over timing of construction of that street.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions for administration before we close the public hearing and move on to business arising? Council? I don't see anybody else in the queue. Then I will close the public hearing and we'll move on to business arising. We're going to start with, we have, as Mr. Welton noted, 18 recommendations. The first of the recommendations is the Northeast Area Structure Plan, and we would start with first reading for that, so we can start discussion and debate. Can I have a motion for first reading? Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Bylaw C-1087-10 being an amendment to the Northwest Area Structure Plan.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. That's a motion for first reading of the Northeast Area Structure Plan.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on first reading? This basically gets it so that we can get to second reading where we do discussion and debate. I will call for the vote on first reading. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor O'Toole, can I have a motion for second reading?
I move that we give second reading to Bylaw C-1087-10.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. So this is a motion for second reading, which now opens it up so we can have discussion and debate. I appreciate that all the plans are interrelated, and so we may have comments that are specific to one of the two individual plans. There's the Copperwood plan and the Kingsgate plan. Would just ask council, maybe as best as possible, we'll try and identify which comments go where, but I appreciate that all the plans are really pretty interconnected. So is there any discussion debate as to the proposed amendments to the Northeast Area Structure Plan? Is there any discussion debate? Councillor Bessie.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. I'll just sorry, I'm just reading our MDP quick, trying to get my thoughts in this. Yeah, I'm just gonna share my thoughts for all of them now, and I obviously won't bother debating all of them. I think really, if the first one passes, then it makes sense to pass all of them. But for me, I'm honestly still on the fence a little bit about this, and I'm kind of curious to hear where the rest of council's at and what council's thinking in terms of. I do like a lot of what's going on in this plan. I really do like preserving that wetland. That's great in my mind. I think that we heard from people in the neighborhood that there's concerns about traffic and there's concerns about the amount of people there. I actually came into this meeting thinking, oh, well, I don't like this plan because it's making the area less dense. And in general, I support denser development. That being said, hearing from the neighbors, having about 15% less people here would actually help with some of those concerns. I get it. It still gets worse when you've got development happening than it is right now. But by right, the developer right now can put in more people than would be proposed on this amendment. So I actually like that it's proposed to put in less people. I think my concerns with this are my two big concerns with this is I don't love seeing a school site move like this. I really do feel for people who thought that they had a school site behind them, and now it's moving, and now some other people who are going to be buying houses will get to benefit from that. I don't love that. And the other thing that I'm struggling with is council's agreed to relax and be open to more small lot residential development, which is an initiative I do support. But in general, I was hoping that we'd see proposals that have more small lot residential be a little bit more creative with how they happen in this, in terms of using some of that linear park space to alleviate parking concerns, in terms of mixing it up with residential general so that you don't have it all crammed into one area. And I don't love especially the northwest area of this plan, where you have a school site moved, and then all of a sudden you've got a lot of small lot residential all put together without a park in the area, without anything in that area. I'm struggling with that, in terms of, I really love parts of this plan, but I'm really struggling to get past that. So I'm still on the fence, and I'm kind of curious where council's sitting with this.
Thanks, Councillor Bressy. Any other discussion or debate on first reading? Sorry, on second reading. Thank you. I'm glad I'm making mistakes early on second of 18 motions rather than right in the middle. I'll just take the opportunity to enter the debate now, and I think similar to Councillor Bressy, I'll make my comments here that would apply to the entire thing. I share the concerns about the school site. I appreciate, we often say that, well, you should have looked at the plans of what was there when you bought, is, one thought that has come up over the years. And if somebody did look at the plans of the neighborhood that would be next door to them when they bought, they would have thought that they were going to get a school site next to them. So that is a concern. And at sort of the natural tension that there is here is that we're in a community that continues to grow, and there are going to be new neighborhoods that are going to pop up to next to your existing neighborhood, and we don't always have the infrastructure in place to manage that. The future 88th Street as a north-south connector is something that our community desperately needs, because I believe that it would take a lot of the load off of Lakeland Drive, of the people who are using that as a way to get out to Claremont and to the north. But the changes that are proposed here, I don't really think have a material impact on that. It really is the construction of 88th Street, which is fully at the control of council. So other than the moving of the school site and the relative lack of creativity maybe in the design, I have to also acknowledge that this is probably one of the most challenging sites that we have in the community. The reason that there hasn't been construction on this site since 2008 is because it has just been so challenging. That wetland has proved to be a roadblock for many, many developers over the years. And I think recognizing that, this is likely the best compromise that we're likely to see. And so for those reasons, I will support the recommendations here and moving forward. And when the time's right, I hope council will encourage administration to bring forward capital plans for 84th Street. I think that it's a vital connector, not just for this area and reducing some of those traffic-related concerns that we heard about today, but I think it's an important part for the future development of the rest of our city. But again, that isn't exclusively related to Kingsgate and the Copperwood changes proposed here. So I will be supporting the plans with maybe some of those reservations, but I get past those reservations because this is a really complicated area to deal with as a result of that massive wetland. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Is there anybody else that wish to enter discussion or debate at this stage? Seeing Councillor Thiessen.
There you go. Thanks, Mayor Given. Sorry for making everyone beat their breath. I'm going to speak as well, like Councillor Bressy and Mayor Given. There are aspects of this plan that I really like and aspects that I don't like at all. One of them, Councillor Platt pointed out to me, and where naturally you think that there's like a bunch of exits. There's really only one. It's on the 88th Street exit. That's going to create some traffic problems, especially under construction and otherwise. I think if council wants to get ahead of this and allow this development to happen and get ahead of it at the same time, I think we need to follow up with one of our famous follow-up motions to push something to the next appropriate standing committee. And the concern that I hear and that I have mostly is around traffic and safety. And especially along 132nd, I've already admitted my own faults. Thank God I never got a ticket for that or hit someone, but I don't want to see it happen in my community either. As far as the steps that the developers have taken, in preserving the wetlands. I think you've done a really great job as far as preserving that, and administration utilizing all the available MR and ER that we possibly have to ensure that that wetland stays healthy, I think is good. I don't like the west end of the property, so I'm going to give you guys a little nudge to maybe if there's some park to create in that area, create it. Might save you money that you're going to pay to the province anyways on getting rid of that little wetland space, but that's up to you guys. All in all, I'm not too concerned about the school site moving. I get it. Actually, when I purchase houses, when I'm looking for a house to purchase, I look for where the school sites are, because that's also where you get the best snow removal as well and the clear paths. So I definitely empathize with the homeowners who have bought along that area. But I think this part of the plan here works, and I think we've done our utmost. We can still do more. Again, that's why I'll probably follow up with a motion for some traffic calming measures or a report on 88th Street and what we can do in the meantime. But our city is growing, and I appreciate the hard work and effort that's put in, so I will support these amendments as is.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Can I have another question for administration on this, or is it? I guess it's just regarding 84th Street. I mean, you made the claim that it'll be up to us to fund 84th Street. My concern with seeing this drawing is that I think 84th Street is going to be a very expensive road to do. We're going to have to deal with a lot of wetland compensations, a lot of issues here. It's already got some challenges, and I really like the plan. I think that you guys did a lot of great work on this between the engineering firm, the developer, and then the city on making a better plan. I know that some of the people probably aren't happy with that the school site moved. I think the school site's in a better location than now, than being right on that corner that we're seeing could be incredibly congested and busy. I like that the collector road has no cars that are going to back onto it. I think that's huge for safety for the area. I'm just still really getting hung up that if this thing was fully built out and 84th Street didn't happen, all this traffic has to come into that one intersection, and all this traffic has to go into 88th Street to get out on 132nd Ave. So I'm just wondering what the feasibility of 84th Street really ever being built. And I say that with, I'm not trying to be negative when I say it, but I mean, it's been on the plans, I think, for about 10 years now to be built. And we're going to need a lot more compensation than 1 quarter to build that road. So,
Mr. Glavin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. So with respect to 84th Street, it hasn't yet emerged as a priority that's been floated in the capital plan from administration. There have been more pressing needs within the community to relieve traffic pressures. With regard to the access onto 132nd being 88th Street, that's consistent with the city's practice in planning of limiting conflict points onto arterial roads. So you would see it in pretty much all new subdivisions that didn't have other connections adjacent to them. So if you looked at Mission Heights, for example, you would see 3 connections onto arterial roads being 68th, 84th, and then 108th Street. Although Mission Heights not quite as big, just given that you do have CKC site as well as Muscogee Park flowing through there. There is a significant amount of population that flows on there, and all 3 of those intersections are signalized, and you would see that this would get signalized at some point in the future as soon as it warrants. And we do those traffic counts on an annual basis at these intersections. I'm not familiar with the current count at this intersection. I'm guessing it's getting closer. It will certainly be closer as Kingsgate builds out. But this practice of limiting connections from residential neighborhoods onto arterials is a standard practice that we have in the city to limit conflict points, which is a safety concern.
Thanks, Councillor Palat. Dr. Glavin. So I don't see anybody else in the queue. We're still on second reading to Bylaw C 1087, the Northeast Area Structure Plan Amendment. Any other comments or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote on second reading. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. That would take us to third reading. Councillor O'Toole, did you start us off on this one? So this is a motion to have third reading.
Mayor Given, I move that Council have third reading of Bylaw C-1087-10 at this meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. So this is a motion to have third and final reading of the proposed bylaw here this evening. If this motion doesn't pass unanimously, then third and final reading would come back at our next council meeting. Is there any discussion or debate as to the merits of having third and final reading? Seeing no one ring in, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does pass unanimously, so we can move on to third and final reading. Councillor O'Toole.
Mayor Given, I move that council give third reading to Bylaw C-1087-10, being the amendment to the northeast area structure plan.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on third and final reading? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Okay, thanks for catching that. We will just cancel that vote. I'll call for the vote again. Please vote on third reading. Thank you. That motion carries. So that'll bring us to our next bylaw that's related, 1409, the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan.
Continue?
Councillor O'Toole, do you want to continue?
I move the council give first reading to Bylaw C-1409, being an amendment to the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. No discussion or debate on first reading. I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you, Councillor. There we go. Thank you. That motion for first reading carries. Councillor O'Toole.
I move that we give second reading to Bylaw C-1409.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on C-1409? Now, this is the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan. Any discussion or debate as to the merits of the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan? Seeing none, and those that I think wish to enter the debate probably said it at the start. I know I certainly did. Then I will call for the vote on second reading. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor O'Toole.
I move that we, council, have third reading of Bylaw C-1409 at this meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Again, this is a motion to have third and final reading. Again, must be unanimous. Otherwise, it would come back at a subsequent council meeting. Is there any discussion or debate on the merits of having third and final reading? Please vote. Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Councillor O'Toole.
And I move that council give third reading to Bylaw C-1409, being a bylaw to adopt the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on third and final reading? Councillor Prairie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. If this bylaw passes, I'll be voting yes to the other ones, but ones because they complement this. But I just can't get past the residential small lot on this, and I don't think it's that big a deal in this neighborhood because it's just pushing that 25% by a little bit. But I really hope that in the future, if this does pass, and that's will of council to approve this, I'm okay with that. Like I said, I'm pretty on the fence on this, but I really hope that if we see small lot residential being expanded even more than this, I could be on board with that. But I hope that we're insisting on a little bit more care and spreading it around and better use of linear parks in the future when we have that. So, said on the fence against this, sort of opposed, but I really hope that this doesn't open the door to just even more of this happening in future developments.
So it's just been brought to my attention that there is a clerical error in the council reports. 1409 that we've been discussing is the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan. 1409, that bylaw, is actually the Copperwood Outline Plan. 1410 is actually the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan. So we've been just through this last bit here discussing and voting on Bylaw C-1409, and we had called it, as it is labeled in our report, the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan. So we're actually on third reading of 1409, which is the Copperwood Outline Plan. So, Councillor Bressie, I would just suggest, with that clarification, and before anybody does the final vote to close off the the Copperwood outline plan, which is what we're dealing with now. Councillor Bressie, save your thought and say it again on 1410, which is Kingsgate. Okay. So I just want to make sure that we clarify that. Again, we recognize, I think, that all of these issues were largely interconnected. There are, at the outline plan level, some differences because we're talking about specific neighborhoods and design within specific neighborhoods. So we'll just pause for a second and acknowledge that 1409, where we're on third reading, is actually the Copperwood outline plan. So if anybody had, if any council members had any comments that they wanted to make specific to the Copperwood outline plan, I think mostly we've been focused on the Kingsgate outline plan. But if anybody had any comments specifically related to the Copperwood outline plan, this third and final reading is of the Copperwood outline plan. Does that change the nature of the discussion for anybody? Or did anybody wish to make any comments with respect to Copperwood? I don't see anybody in the queue.
We have to redo the process?
No, the motions were for 1409, so they were for that bylaw. It was, I guess, and it really is the bylaw number that is what we're voting on. Shame on us that we didn't recognize that 1409 was in fact the Copperwood. I appreciate administration catching that and bringing it to our attention before we close off the vote on that. So thank you for that. So I don't think there's anything else that we need to undo, but that's why we just had a full pause to make sure that we all recognize before we closed out the third and final reading on this that it was in fact had been flipped. Okay? So Councillor Bressie, please do make your comments on Kingsgate next when we're doing 1410. Okay. I don't see anybody that had any comments, and again, most of the discussion had been focused on Kingsgate. Last opportunity for comments on 1409, the Copperwood outline plan. Seeing none, then I will call for the vote on third and final reading. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. I would look for a motion for first reading on bylaw C 1410, the Kingsgate Landing outline plan. Councillor O'Toole.
I move that council give first reading to bylaw C 1410, being an amendment to the
to adopt
the Kingsgate Landing outline plan.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Toole. So this is a motion for first reading. No discussion and debate on first reading. I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor O'Toole.
I move the council give second reading to bylaw C-1410.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion on second reading of 1410, the Kingsgate Landing outline plan? Councillor Bressie?
I said it.
Maybe Councillor Bressie, could you maybe just to make sure that we get them in the minutes or on the record related to the actual plan?
Yeah. For me, it's I'm so on the fence of this. I think for me, it's largely maybe it's more of a principled stand than anything. Seeing as I've got a pretty clear sense of how it's going to go. I've got concerns as we talk about more residential small lot development. I actually really do support the direction of taking those 4 feet off lots in principle, but I think that a bit more care, a bit more effort could be put into surrounding it with intermixing it with other land uses in terms of making better use of linear parks. And for me, if we're going to start going down the road of building more of this into our neighborhoods, and I could be behind that, but I think a bit more care needs to be done if we keep on opening that door further than it's opening today. So for that reason, I can't support it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Before I move on Kingsgate, I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that I did hear the concerns of the residents. I believe that they are largely related to traffic in an adjacent neighborhood and concerns that the traffic here this development would compound those. I'd make the observation that the developer had the right to move forward with development under the old plan, which actually would have seen more people move into the neighborhood. But I think the issues that have been raised today are ones that council will have to deal with, and I'm sure we will see council asking administration to look into those issues that were raised by some of the delegations here today. And I know that I will be advocating to increase the priority of 84th Street. I think that is ultimately one of the best solutions for our entire community that would largely address some of the specific concerns that we heard from adjacent landowners. So other than some of the design quibbles, which I think are largely a result of how much space is eaten up by that wetland, which I think is a very positive use of land. I think that this is a really constrained site, and I think that the plan as proposed makes the best of a very challenging situation. So for all those reasons, I'll support it. Any other discussion or debate on second reading of 1410, the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Can I have a motion for third reading, Councillor O'Toole?
I move the council have third reading of Bylaw C-1410 at this meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. So this is a motion to have third and final reading here at this meeting. Any discussion or debate as to the merits of having third and final reading? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. That motion carries.
And I move that we give third reading to Bylaw C-1410, being a bylaw to adopt the Kingsgate Landing Outline Plan.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on third and final reading? Again, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. We're not through yet.
Got a few more here.
You're going to keep going, Councillor O'Toole?
Okay, sure. Okay. I move that we give first reading to Bylaw C-1260-112, being an amendment to the Land Use Bylaw.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. No discussion or debate on first reading. I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor O'Toole.
I move that we give second reading to Bylaw C-1260-112.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on Bylaw C-1260-112, the amendment to the Land Use Bylaw? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. Councillor O'Toole.
I move that council have third reading of Bylaw C-1260-112 at this meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Again, motion to have third and final reading at this meeting must pass unanimously, otherwise it comes back. Any discussion or debate on that point? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries.
And Mayor Given, I move that we give third reading to Bylaw C-1260-112, being an amendment to the Land Use Bylaw.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on third and final reading of that Land Use Bylaw amendment? Again, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. And that motion carries.
And Mayor Given, I move that we rescind the Copperwood Outline Plan resolution.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. So this is a motion to rescind that resolution from back in circa 2008 or prior, as that has sort of been replaced by the land use bylaw, by the outline plan that has been adopted. Any discussion or debate on that motion to rescind? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. That motion carries. Councillor O'Toole.
Mayor Given, I move that we have council rescind Kingsgate Landing Outlaw Plan resolution.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. The motion to rescind that outline plan resolution. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries as well. I believe that handles all of our business related to the public hearings this evening. I want to acknowledge that we had a number of residents that attended this evening. Thank you very much for being here and watching the process and sharing your comments. Hopefully you'll see those reflected in council decisions over the coming weeks and months. We're going to move on to the rest of our agenda, which I think really is we had no public delegations in our set delegation portion of our agenda. So we'll move on to council member reports, and I'll look to my council colleagues if they have reports from their agencies, boards, and commissions. Councillor Thiessen, did you have some?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Given. I did, but it was in regards to the previous public hearing that we just had. Just sort of, as I alluded to before, we had lots of our community come in and talk about traffic and safety. So I would like to move that administration bring forward a report in regards to traffic count, safety, and traffic calming measures along 132nd Avenue at 88th Street to the appropriate standing committee. Speaking to this, I think it's the right thing to do. A lot of times, as a council, we don't plan for these things. Developers will develop when they develop, and we're picking up the pieces afterwards. But I think if we can get ahead of it and at least have an understanding of the context of the impacts that this development might bring to future traffic congestion in the area and traffic safety, I think it would be our due diligence to at least have administration bring forward a report detailing those. So I would urge council to support this.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Sorry, could you just say that motion one more time? 132nd at 88th Street?
Yeah, for sure, Councillor Bressie. I would to bring forward a report in regards to traffic counts, safety, and traffic calming measures along 132nd Ave at 88th Street to the appropriate standing committee. I do have another follow-up motion, but it's a little different, but it's in regards to something the mayor talked about on 84th Street.
If I could ask a question to admin too. I'm just kind of curious. I know that there's been a transportation master plan work underway for a long time now, and we haven't seen it yet. And if that's imminent, I might not be supportive of this motion. I'm just kind of curious when council might expect to see that, or if there's any other reports that we might expect in the somewhat near future that could touch on this issue.
Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I know that they continue to work with the consultant on that, and I would expect within the first half of this year we would see the TMP, although I don't have an exact date for delivery for that being finalized.
Okay. With that being said, I think that it's good. I would like to know more about this area, but I'm looking at Councillor Thiessen and Mayor Given if I should move an amendment or if there'd be openness to a friendly amendment, and that is I hear a lot of concern about 132nd Avenue, and not just at this intersection, all along 132nd, all west of 100th Street. And I'd suggest that if we're going to ask for more information, I'd kind of like to know about all of it, or sorry, east of 100th Street, more than just this one intersection. I think might be more useful.
Okay, so I'm not hearing you make a motion. You're just
well, I'm asking if I should make a motion or if there'd be welcoming to a friendly amendment, which we're allowed to make now in our.
So I guess my suggestion would be that the scope of work that you're describing is probably quite a bit more significant than the scope of work imagined by Councillor Thiessen. So I would suggest that it would have to be a specific motion, or yeah.
Sure. Then I'll move that we amend the motion to strike 88th Street and read east of 100th Street.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Bressie. Any discussion or debate on Councillor Bressie's amendment? I will recognize Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm just wondering, and I appreciate the intent of it. I'm just east of it would include two entrances into an industrial area. Like I'm wondering if you want to say east of the train tracks or something like that. Just I would like to narrow the scope a little bit for administration. I think there's a couple of crossings there that probably aren't as worrisome. I think as well, for me they're not as worrisome, I guess, but just kind of a point of reference maybe.
I'll say that I'll recognize Councillor Thiessen as well, since it's his main motion. So I think I won't support the amendment, and I probably won't support Councillor Thiessen's motion, because I think the majority of concerns that I heard were actually with traffic along. I heard less concern about 132nd and more concern along Lakeland Drive and within the actual neighborhood. I certainly did hear about the access out onto 132nd, the challenge there. I think those are questions that are pretty easily answered. Probably by email with administration. The scope of work that's sort of proposed, like traffic calming measures along what's ultimately going to be a 4-lane divided roadway, I think are probably wouldn't necessarily address a lot of the concerns that I heard from residents. And the scope of work proposed in the amendment, when we undertook the last transportation master plan, the transportation planning along 132nd was probably the most contentious portion of the transportation master plan that had the entire Chamber of Commerce and adjacent landowners very, very involved at council, and took probably 6 months. And so that is recognizing that the entire transportation master plan will be coming within the next 6 months. I think a scope of work that large is probably better suited to the transportation master plan discussion. So for that reason, I won't support the amendment. And for the sort of misdirection of, I think, what the residents' concerns were, I won't support the main motion. Councillor Plott, you're back in the queue.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I wouldn't support the amendment, but I will support the main motion. And I think for me, 132nd Ave, although a lot of the conversation around 88th Street, I think it's because it's backing up because they can't actually get out on 132nd Ave. And to Councillor Thiessen's point earlier, I think part of the reason that maybe it gets better as you come towards town is people still haven't slowed down yet. So it's harder to get onto 132nd Ave from 88th Street than it would be as you go more west. And so I would like to see what we can do on that area. I don't think it's going to be a problem tomorrow. They're not talking about developing this it would be this fall before we'd probably see a first house go in there. But, it'd be something that it would be nice to have brought forward and looked at and reviewed just to see what we could do to appease these residents.
Councillor Bressie, I see you in the queue. I'll come back to you to close on your amendment, okay? Councillor Thiessen?
Actually, you can probably just go right to Councillor Bressie. I was just going to say what Councillor Platt just said. So,
Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Yeah, I won't be supporting the amendment. I do like the first motion, and partially because of the fact that revisiting the numbers on 88th, I think, is important for the traffic flow within that subdivision. 84th, in my opinion, is a lower priority at this time, as it's truly just making a connector for people that don't live in the city. So I'm looking forward to see the traffic information that comes out of 88. So I'll support the original motion.
Okay, I don't see anybody else in the amendment, so I'll go back to Councillor Bressie if he wishes to close. Okay, thanks very much. I don't see anybody else in the queue, and so we're going to vote on Councillor Bressie's amendment, which proposed to sort of broaden the scope from east of 100th Street. Please vote on Councillor Bressie's amendment. Thank you. That motion does not carry. And so we're back to Councillor Thiessen's main motion. Any discussion or debate on Councillor Thiessen's main motion? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I appreciated feedback from my colleagues. It was definitely too broad of an amendment, which you guys convinced me of. But I'm going to move another amendment, and that is to add a 92nd Street. And the reason for that is because that's actually where I hear the big complaints on 132nd Avenue. I hear a lot of people, and ever since one of our first council meetings was talking about traffic lights on 92nd Street and 88th, and ever since then, I still hear from people every couple months about, oh, that was really dumb that you guys did that. And we made some promises back then about following up with information and potential other measures in the area, and we never have talked about it again. So I think, and it just doesn't make sense to me to look at one potentially troublesome intersection when you've got another one just 4 blocks away that you're not looking at.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. So a motion to amend the scope of Councillor Thiessen's motion to be from 92nd Street to 92nd Street to 88th Street. Any discussion or debate on that amendment? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. So we're back to Councillor Thiessen's main motion as amended. Any need for any discussion or debate on the main motion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries unanimously as well. Were there any other motions arising from our public hearing before I move on? I just have a question. Director Glavin, is it likely that the transportation master plan will have some reference to the need or timing of 84th Street?
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. If it's like similar master plans, it will be population driven. So there'll be thresholds within it that will trigger different roads or twinning of different roads. I'm not sure of the timing based on the current draft of the plan for 84th, but there would be some sort of trigger point in there.
And Director Levin, are you confident that we will see that plan prior to heading into the 2021 budget discussion?
This plan has taken longer than we initially anticipated due to some of the challenges that we've had working through the project for a variety of reasons. I do expect that we will see it in the first half of the year, and that would be the plan. And if we saw that going offside, we would brief council.
Okay. So with that in mind, I was going to start thinking about the 84th Street. It sounds to me like we will see a comprehensive transportation master plan in the first half of the year that would give council enough time to decide whether they wanted to increase the priority of 84th Street. And so I don't think there's a need. For me, there's not a need for a motion to do that because I think it will happen naturally because administration is bringing forward that plan. Councillor Minhas?
Thank you, Mayor. I got a question for Brian. Is any possibility to 88 open to 124 Avenue to 132 to connect that, or that is dead? Like I said, they said a green, whatever, they're going to use it for green or dog catcher.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. There's been no planning to that extent, and I'm not aware of the current condition of the roadway or connections in that area, and we'd have to analyze that before I could give you a good answer as to the feasibility of that or the desirability of doing that.
Okay. So sounds like would have to look into it, but certainly not at the top of the list right now. Looks like there's no other business arising. Then we will go to council member reports on our agencies, boards, and commissions, and I'll just look to council members to flag to me if they have any of their committees that they need to report on at this time. Councillor O'Toole.
Mayor Given, I've got two reports. One is the Combative Sports Commission. There was an event that was supposed to be held in early December. It got canceled due to the fight card. Number of athletes were injured or come down with the flu. And this coming week, that will be rescheduled. So I'm just giving everybody the heads up that it will be coming back. I think it's going to be in early March. We haven't given the license yet, but it's been applied. And also the Alberta Bilingual Municipalities Association. We were supposed to have a meeting here last week, and because of some federal grants that have come to the board, that meeting was delayed, and so they can understand where that money would be, the amount, and what the purpose would be for that money. So I will have hopefully some good news here in the next month to let you know what the proposal for some of this federal funding will be given to the province. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Were there any other council members that had reports from the external committees? Seeing nobody flagging anything, then we'll go to council member roundtable, and we'll start with Councillor Bressy.
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. Two events that I'll highlight that went together is I'm wearing a purple flower right now because along with Councillor O'Toole, I got to go to the Proclamation of Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and it was a really cool one. Right now, for the rest of January at the Center for Creative Arts, there's a cool exhibition. I forget the exact title, but it's a journey through Alzheimer's. It's about a local woman, a journey through awareness, I think, is what it is what Council Steve told me. But it's by a local woman who learned how to paint, and then and you can see her skills developing as she learns how to paint, and then as she suffers with dementia and the challenges struggling those, you can see the paints change again, and you definitely see the cognitive effects that it's got, but also you get to see the joy that she's taken in painting and how that's connecting her with where it is, and it's actually a pretty powerful exhibit, so I'd encourage everybody to get over there during January. An interesting, well, not interesting, just a really sad statistic actually that was shared at the Proclamation was a recent survey of Canadian seniors found that 1 in 4 people reported that they'd be ashamed to let friends or colleagues know if they were starting to suffer from dementia, which is really sad. 1 in 4 would be ashamed suffering dementia, which isn't right because it's no different than getting any other sort of illness. We shouldn't be ashamed of that, and that makes living with it a lot more difficult. And so that was a sad stat to hear. And so the next day, it was very encouraging. I got to go to the Headstrong Youth Summit, which was getting a whole bunch. It was an event by the Métis Nation of Alberta Youth, and it was a summit getting kids together to speak out about and be brave about mental health issues. And I really hope that as we have initiatives like that to end the stigma, that 40 years from now, and hopefully even sooner, that zero seniors would say they're ashamed of dealing with mental health issues. So it was a sad event in the evening, and an encouraging event that actually was bringing some solutions in the morning.
Councillor Bressie, Councillor Thiessen.
Ooh, I got to follow that tearjerker up. I like it. Thank you very much for that report, Councillor Bressie. Actually, I took the time off over Christmas vacation to sort of recharge my batteries. You know, sometimes when your phone is not acting properly, you just turn the power off and you power it down, and when you turn it back on, it's all right again. Sometimes I think even human beings need to shut off their personal phone and charge their batteries. So I was really thankful to be able to do that. Also really thankful to take part in the Muskosipi Park's New Year's celebration. I got to ring that in with Councillor Kevin O'Toole, serving over 1,000 hot chocolates to the wanting people of our community who had rightfully paid for those hot chocolates. And we were chocolate making machines working side by side with a volunteer group. And had a really good time serving that up. Our families were there, and got to skate on the pond, watch the fireworks. I wanted to give a shout out to our organizing committee down at Muskosipi Park for the events. It was their first event as a team, and I thought they put it together really, really well. And they were really eager when we realized we had limited supplies of hot chocolate earlier in the night. So when we sent them on a shopping run, they were eager to get it done and make sure that there were no blips. And there were no blips, and any blip was smoothed out really quick. So I want to say thank you to that. And also thank you to our director, Director Miller. I intimated to him last year, right after the fireworks celebration, there were several people who had commented to me that we closed the pavilion down too early and they needed to use bathrooms, wash their hands, take off skates, stuff like that. It was a brief conversation of maybe 2-3 minutes. Shortly after we reconvened in the new year. Obviously that was heard, so I really want to say thank you to Director Miller and his team for ensuring that the pavilion was open till 11 o'clock and people could enjoy the fireworks and still use the facilities as they needed before they went off to do other things. So thank you very much to Director Miller and his team. That was great.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I as well had a fairly quiet couple weeks and was noticeable watching your screen time alerts and your phone time alerts drop. But it's nice to see they're coming back to normal. Maybe that's not necessarily a good thing, but it was a great time to charge the batteries and just putting a lot of thoughts into some 2020 goals for myself with life, but also a lot with council and what kind of courses and education I want to undertake this year.
Councillor Platt. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. I had a wonderful Christmas getting to serve some community groups, some of our street engaged population with some fantastic organizations. Oasis dinner on Saturday night, the 21st, had a large number of homeless and folks living in poverty that took advantage of that meal. That was great. And the other thing that I did that was really fun, on the 18th, I was able to judge a Christmas house decorating contest for one of our neighborhood associations. So Highland Park, I was driven around and looked at about 15 different homes that had decorated in all kinds of fantastic manner, from very traditional lights with lots of lights to big blow up minions and things like that in the yard. And one house was must have been undergoing renovations and had a big dumpster in the yard, and they decorated their dumpster quite beautifully. So it was difficult. It was. I'm really glad that straight away I decided I would judge based on 3 criteria. That was the volume of lights, or how many lights there were. the unique features that were like the never before seen features of Christmas lighting and just the overall impact. So thank goodness I did that, because when I did up all the totals, it was fairly close, but there was one clear winner, and it was a jaw-dropping display of just a ton of lights and beautifully done, aesthetically gorgeous, and a couple of unique little features in there as well. And when we knocked on the door to congratulate, she said thank goodness, because her husband had spent weeks doing that. So Highland Park, congratulations. And of course a special mention to the huge tree on 100th Street in Highland Park, which is known as the Tree of Hope, and just how gorgeous that is this year. It says Noel on one side and Joy on the other side, I believe, and has just life-sized, enormous gifts under it, including a life-sized Barbie doll there. So special mention to that one, but he didn't win because he did get a lot of help from other members of the community and the city. Anyway, good to be back, and Happy New Year to y'all.
Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Bill Mayor Given. I was out of service, but I do I do appreciate few people come visit me, lots of them. But Kevin O'Toole and Dylan came, and Brian and Chris, they came visit when I was my power wire was cut off my knee. It was getting fixed. So I didn't do much, but I had a good Christmas with the family, and New Year was quiet, but it was a good time. But I'm getting better now, so thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Minhas. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I also had a lot of time with family over Christmas. It was my year to travel to BC to see family, so it was nice to get away. Other than I drove through the Coquihalla where they received 70 centimeters of snow in 24 hours, so it was pretty crazy, but it was fun. I let my husband drive, so it's okay. And anyways, other than that, one thing that wasn't mentioned that I attended prior to Christmas was I attended the Grand Prairie Assembly Christmas Mixer, which was hosted by MP Workington and MLA Allard and MLA Taves. And so that was a great turnout and a great opportunity for people to get together with our provincial and federal elected officials. So thank you to them for hosting. And that's it for tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. A couple of events that I'd like to just talk a little bit about. Council will join me as many members of the city staff. We had a demo on the robotic snowbot that will be used in either mowing lawns or possibly doing the pathways in Muskosipi Park. And it's been, I understand that some of our staff have been interviewed from different parts of Canada to see how it worked and how basically what we plan to do with it. So it's going to be, I don't know, one of those things that we're the first at, I guess, or close to the first. Also, I attended a check presentation from the Rotary Club to the Decoy Community Hub project. The Decoy Armories was built in 1942. It's 76 years old, I think it is now. It was used for a number of years. It's starting to show some age and it needs some improvement. So what is being planned over the next 3 years is getting it back to where it looks good again and more functional, whether it's washrooms or meeting spaces or just other things that are going to make it cosmetic. But it's been around a long time. It's something that I think the pride and joy. I know I'm on that board, and there's a lot of good things happening there, and I think that there's going to be a lot more things happening in that building once it gets fully recharged. So thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. I'll try to be brief. Just prior to the Christmas break, I attended a AMSC Board of Governors meeting, the Alberta Municipal Services Corporation, which I sit on behalf of AUMA, and then followed that up with an AUMA board meeting the next day. Also quiet over the Christmas holidays, but I did want to highlight in the new year. A couple of events. First, I had a great chance to meet with representatives from Nautical to hear the most recent update about their project as they're going out to market, looking for financing, working with provincial and federal governments to secure what they need to start up that project. It sounds as though the project, Council may be familiar that it was previously sort of in 3 segments. They're imagining sort of a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. They're now discussing a 2-segment project, with each segment being larger than they were before. So about the same sort of scale, but 2 larger segments rather than 3 segments. So it was good to receive that update, and I did ask if they would circulate the information that they shared with me to all of Council, and so I would hope and expect that we'd see that over the next little while. The following day, I had an opportunity to meet, as you probably heard, with Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, who was in the Grande Prairie and Peace River region. Appreciated the opportunity to meet with her and discuss obviously the state of Grande Prairie's local economy, our natural resource sector, and natural gas in particular. I found her to be really receptive. I think that this, if I could characterize the meeting for council members, I think it was the intent was to start to build a relationship. As we all know, the governing Liberal Party has no seats in Alberta or Saskatchewan. And I appreciate that this was a sincere attempt to start to build a network so they could have a better understanding and clearer view of what's going on. And I think it's certainly to the City of Grande Prairie and our region's interest if we have some connection there. So I really appreciated the opportunity to do that, especially considering that she was called away. She did have a day of events that were planned that she had to cancel because she was called away because of the events in Iran. And the plane crash. The Prime Minister asked her to be in Edmonton, and so she cut her visit here to Grande Prairie short, but I would suspect that it won't be the last visit to our region. Councillor Platt and I attended last Friday a Tri-Municipal Industrial Partner meeting. The MD of Greenview has revised some documents and would expect that those will come back in the next couple of weeks for council review. And I'm sure that the ongoing developments there will be of interest to all council members, and we look forward to reporting to that on those at a future council meeting. And with that, we'll call our meeting adjourned.